Hello, everyone. My name is John Bristow. I'm the Community Director for Octopus Deploy. Thank you for joining us during today's live webinar featuring myself and Elijah talking about DevSecOps. Before we kick things off, I just want to give you guys a chance to get orientated with our environment here. So this is a live webinar, which means you can totally ask questions if you want. If you're happen to joining us through one of our many streaming platforms, YouTube, X, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, you can totally send us a comment there. Let us know if you're enjoying the stream, if you have any questions, anything at all. We're more than happy to answer them live here. Before I turn things over to Elijah, I just wanted to go through some housekeeping items before we begin. So first and foremost, don't worry, you're in the right place. This is a live webinar. So if you want to find out more of the webinars that we have available, you can check out our website, which is at octopus.com/webinars. There you'll see a couple of webinars that have been listed. Later on this month, we've got a new webinar featuring Robert and Kit talking about a new feature we're going to be adding to Octopus called Octopus Triggers. This will allow you to automate part of your deployments, specifically around Kubernetes. We've also got a webinar featuring Adam and Graham talking about secure CD at scale with Octopus Deploy and HashiCorp Vault. HashiCorp Vault is a very popular solution for credential management. And so these and other webinars you can find up on our website at octopus.com/webinars. We also have an event coming up called Shift. This is a virtual event occurring on November 20th and 21st. It's a 2-day virtual event featuring a whole bunch of speakers on a wide variety of topics. This is from Octopus, and if you're at all interested, you can check this out at our website. We have a schedule of sessions available, which you can also check out at /schedule. And we've just got a ton of content available for you to check out. Paul will be doing a keynote with Colin. There will be a bunch of sessions on Kubernetes, on GitOps, on CD, on Argo, on Octopus, etc. So you can check that all out at octopus.com/shipped. So make sure to register. It is open today. Another resource I wanted to point you to is our support for Kubernetes, which you can find here. If you're at all curious at all, you can find out more about Octopus and how we support Kubernetes by visiting our subs site here. We also have a white paper available, which you can find here. This is a white paper that's been written by Bob and Kit talking about basically Kubernetes CD at scale. So if you're looking to do continuous deployment to Kubernetes clusters, etc., that's something that we support. We also have a state of GitOps report that we're building at the moment. Our survey is currently open, which you can check out at this link here. We're looking to build out a report featuring voices and opinions like from you, and to give us your thoughts and feelings around GitOps, the practice, how you're utilizing it, whether it's useful, etc. And then at the end of that, we'll be publishing a report. And then finally, and probably most importantly, this session is going to be recorded and is going to be made available up on our YouTube channel. You can find this at youtube.com/octopusdeploy. There you'll find a whole bunch of videos. We do videos at least twice a week, and we post all our webinars there, so make sure to check that out. All right, and with that, sorry Elijah, I was just trying to get all the housekeeping notes out. So Elijah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Definitely. And thanks for the intro to, of course, Octopus. Some of those videos are really exciting so far. I really enjoy watching some of the Octopus stuff and seeing how that grows, especially around Kubernetes, which, of course, is the topic that we're on today. Just a quick introduction to myself. My name's Elijah Snyder. I'm a solutions architect with a company called NextOrbit. NextOrbit is a HashiCorp partner, and we were really excited when we saw some of what Octopus could do. So we wanted to jump in and work with Octopus, as well as see how well it integrated with some of the systems that we're normally working with. That includes things like Terraform, as well as HashiCorp Vault, as you already mentioned. We wanted to dive into some DevSecOps topics. We also wanted to dive into a couple things with using platform engineering, which is really why we're here when it comes to Octopus. So without any further ado, we'll go ahead and jump in. we're going to talk today about application deployment inside of Kubernetes. Octopus will, of course, help us out with that. There is overlap when we talk about tools like Terraform, but we're really focusing on Octopus today, which can go ahead and just take your existing YAML. It can take all of the stuff that you've already built through dry runs. It can grab Helm, and it can go ahead and push all of that in Kubernetes for you. When it comes to Kubernetes, there are a lot of security challenges that I would say a lot of engineers are still kind of working through, and we'll drill into some of those as we go. When it comes to Octopus Deploy, of course, we are really going to drill into those security concepts as well. That's going to go from everything from an artifact repository through the Octopus feeds to actually watching Octopus deploy that information, as well as following our DevSecOps practices of making sure that we're monitoring and notifying people when we make changes to that application. Just a quick best practices at the end, and of course, a Q&A as well. Now, HTMX is a popular framework that a lot of people are working with lately. You may love it or hate it. When I first heard about it, of course, I was kind of in the party where people were saying, hey, this is just PHP, but a little bit different. However, when you work through HTMX, you learn things about how the RESTful services were really supposed to work. So you'll see the majority of state and everything else transferred directly over HTML or right over through HTTP. So that's also an interesting kind of area where we look at when it comes to applications. I'm sure a lot of viewers out there are already working with applications that are on React, where you're transferring things like JSON. And of course, HTMX is a little bit different where you're actually providing HTML documents in your responses. This can make it a little bit faster to deploy, which again, we can use Octopus to go ahead and update our templates, our applications, our assets, everything else that we need for something like an HTMX application. Jumping back over to Kubernetes, which of course is where we would want to deploy our application, there again are a lot of engineering topics that comes when you're talking about Kubernetes. You want to make sure that you are managing your namespaces correctly. You of course want to make sure that if you're using a cloud provider, you've got all of your accounts and everything mapped over to the appropriate role-based access controls. You want to make sure that that cluster follows the best practices of your cloud provider as well as the best practices of your organization. Of course, there are tools that you can run through that will go ahead and tell you different things about your environment, whether or not you're on the latest Kubernetes versions. Of course, accounts that are inside of your environment that may no longer be used or have any additional permissions that it doesn't seem like they should be able to. When it comes to launching applications inside of Kubernetes, of course, we're using container images. Those container images are built from, you can start from anything like, let's say, a default kind of a shipped Python version. So let's say that I went ahead and grabbed Python 11. And so we found out that one of the packages that I'm using may have a dependency on a product or a repository that happened to be including some binaries or something or building packages that are not exactly up to snuff when it comes to our security posture. That also applies to, of course, the versions that we're using of the actual tools, whether it be Node or whether it be Python, or even if we're using Go, we want to make sure that we're doing things in a secure manner, trusting that our supply chain is going to work correctly. You know, there's been a couple back and forth on supply chain when it comes to things like Python. We want to make sure that we are shipping applications to a trusted source. Again, Octopus comes here to the rescue where we can go through our feeds and see all of our artifacts and the latest artifacts presented. We can go ahead and scan those and then let everybody know when we've released a new, more secure version. When we work through all that, of course, we're going to have all of these dynamic environments. Other people are going to be working inside of these environments alongside us. We may introduce additional security practices. There are, wonderful advantages to using something like Istio, of course, and whether or not you're doing something like a microservices framework. Of course, you've got a lot of moving parts in there. That's where our CI part of the CI/CD comes in. And then of course we use Octopus to make sure that we actually get that delivered into an environment in a smooth, enjoyable way for developers, so that they are able to make sure that we get those products delivered with the correct versions And of course, if there's any other dependencies, we wouldn't want to ship a microservice that's expecting to use a specific call to another microservice that may be out of date or out of version. So again, Octopus comes to a rescue for us, so where we'll be able to see that overview, that single pane of glass, be able to see what other people have done inside of our environment, and really be able to lock in a workflow where our developers enjoy it, as well as we've got all of these additional systems in place, from protecting the supply chain through the artifact repositories. I believe Octopus uses its own feeds, as well as I think we talked about Artifactory, didn't we, John?
Yeah, we did. So Octopus has this concept called feeds, which is basically a way for you to set up where to go get packages/artifacts. So it can point to a variety of locations, including Artifactory.
Yeah. And again, just to touch again on how critical it is to consider that supply chain and being able to monitor exactly what's going on with those artifacts when they're shipping, how you can keep your versions correctly. But most importantly, I would say, especially with some of the news that we see going on when it comes to different package repositories that are facing challenges where somebody has actually injected malicious code inside of a package or tricked a developer by using a name almost like the package that they were trying to grab. So in those instances, of course, we would have a container that was insecure. It may not have the correct versions. We, of course, want to see when we ship that container to find out exactly if there was a security event that we wanted to be aware of. And of course, using Octopus to see that single pane of glass will help us out when it comes to all of those moving parts. Now, Next Orbit is a HashiCorp partner. We have several ambassadors on the team. Many of us actually worked for HashiCorp and saw some of the tools go through a lot of different lifecycle changes. A lot of us watched Terraform Enterprise grow up. We also watched Vault change a lot of the ways that the workflows worked. HashiCorp Vault, I'm sure everybody's familiar with, is a way that you'll be able to store secrets. You'll be able to store API keys, passwords, everything else. And Vault is one of my favorite things about Vault, and this, of course, not just because we're a HashiCorp Vault, or I'm sorry, not only because we're a HashiCorp partner, but also because I enjoy using the tool Vault. You can access that through common languages like Go, Python, Node, whatever you want. You can interact directly with Vault thanks to some of their client libraries. But one of my favorite things, I'll tell you, I am a curl junkie. I'm not
Okay.
sure how many other people, are out there, banging away at curl when it comes to trying to test different endpoints, as well as going and fetching secrets and everything else. I absolutely love curl. I'm not sure if there's any other tools. Are there any tools that you really like, John? Is there like a Insomnia or a Postman, or do you bang out curl requests?
Yeah, I'll use Fiddler from time to time. I really
Fiddler.
like that tool for just inspecting HP requests. But yeah, a bit of a curl junkie myself. Dabble in PowerShell from time to time. So don't be afraid of command lines. They're there to help.
Absolutely. And of course, Vault comes with a really robust command line as well. With the Vault CLI, you'll be able to add keys, you'll be able to review keys, and of course, you'll be able to use that with your applications. There was a feature introduced not too long ago where you can actually use the Vault CLI to pre-populate your environment with those secrets. So once again, developers can have a really easy experience where they're able to grab those secrets directly from Vault and populate that environment. Developers might be used to using something like a .env or some sort of strategy along those lines. And of course, we know what generally happens with something like that. You have to be very aware that you haven't accidentally checked in that environment file. You want to make sure you've got your git ignore up to snuff. You want to make sure that all those secrets are in a secure place. And Vault is a really great place for that.
Just on
Not
that
only
note, the thing about environments and environment variables is that they also change between deployment targets. So things
right.
change as you move from, say, development to staging to production. So you got to be aware of that as well. But you're absolutely right. The good news is if you're using a platform like GitHub, there are ways in which it will detect whether or not you've leaked
Right.
keys and things like that. It will notify you automatically in some cases. So yeah, you've got some protection there.
Definitely. And of course, since this is about Octopus, we can use Octopus Deploy to reach right into Vault like we can with our applications as well. Vault, of course, has policies around different credentials. You can create different namespaces, you can create teams, you can add different abilities to have that role-based access control in place. And you can also do the same thing for machine-to-machine authentication. We spoke about some microservices earlier, and of course, when it comes to microservices, you want to make sure that you have that zero trust. We want to make sure that we've got certificates in place. If we have to use something like a username and password, we want to make sure that we have that in place. Of course, that would be sort of a legacy system scenario, hopefully. And so that machine to machine authentication is really helpful for Vault as well. And if something happens, of course, you can go ahead and rotate that. Speaking of rotation, Vault, of course, will be able to rotate your passwords when it comes to something like MySQL, Postgres, all that stuff with Vault Dynamic Engines. So you don't have your ops team running around resetting passwords, having to coordinate that back to developers. We're really trying to make this easy here. So when we use systems like Vault with something like Octopus Deploy, not only is it easy, but it's enjoyable, which means people are going to really want to stick to that path. When it comes to Octopus Deploy, just running through some of the workflows and some of the great videos that John has made already, as well as many of the guests that have been in these videos as well. We know that we'll be able to use Octopus to be able to monitor any of our VCS repos. That, of course, is where I would say, everything starts. Everybody's inside of a Git or a Get flow. Maybe they're using platforms, of course, like GitHub, GitLab, etc. GitHub and GitLab, of course, have their own kind of CI processes. We can build releases, we can build artifacts, everything else. But when it really comes to that continuous delivery portion is when we want to see something like Octopus go into effect. Being able to, add those vulnerability scans, a lot of the VCS systems have that as well. But we want to go ahead and extend that as well so that we can have that path that's going to let us see some of that information, emerge that on dashboards, emerge that in our monitoring, make sure that we've got, a full end-to-end view of what we're doing with our applications.
Did you want to take a look at a quick demo of this in Octopus? I can switch over to my screen and give folks a taste of what this looks like if you're all curious.
Absolutely.
So this is the Octopus dashboard. If you haven't seen this before, this is what life looks like from within Octopus. So you'll see a dashboard that looks something like this. In here, we have our projects and we have our various environments, development, test, staging, etc. Then we have our versions of our app that have been deployed. If we take a look at one of these, say, for example, let's take a look at this project here for a car rental. This is a fictitious car rental, of course, but if we're to take a look at the deployment process associated with this, these are the series of steps that are run to do a deployment. And as Elijah was saying, there's integrations that you can use in the case of DevSecOps for things like Vault, for example. So if I wanted to, I could add integration with HashiCorp Vault directly within Octopus itself and make it part of that deployment process. So when we talk about DevSecOps, we talk about Kubernetes, deployment of Kubernetes containers to clusters, etc. These things, you can orient your deployment process in such a way that it is utilizing these best practices going forward that Elijah was talking about. So that's what this would look like from a tooling perspective.
Yes, and that tooling, again, makes it really easy to see that single pane of glass. I noticed on the car rental as well, there were steps to go ahead and alert DBAs of changes, make sure your developers are aware that we're launching a product, make sure that they know that we're updating microservices, etc.
That's pretty important. You got to let people know that we're doing deployment. So
Yes, definitely. I mean, especially on the case of those Friday deployments, right? You want to make sure that everybody,
that's okay. We can deploy on Friday. Deploying on
that's
Friday
right.
or Saturday or Sunday is fine.
That's right. And then, of course, we have all of those notifications, everything, so nobody wakes up and says, "Oh no, we've got some interesting monitoring. Alert manager has gone off." Of course, all of that is right there. They can jump on Octopus and see what's been going on. They can jump into Slack and see those notifications and everything. So jumping back over to the Kubernetes deployments, we've run through a lot of this already. An example here, of course, is secrets encryption and transit and at rest. We talked about Vault. So Vault, of course, will keep all of those secrets encrypted when they're at rest, and then has that protected HTTPS call to make sure that if they are in flight, we're protecting those secrets as well. Dynamic secrets, already mentioned, we would be able to go ahead and have passwords automatically rotate. So that's one way where we won't have to keep our ops team busy chasing down old passwords or anything like that. We can trigger that, whenever is necessary. If we do end up with one of those environment files checked into GitHub, we can go ahead and rotate those really quickly. Since everybody's going out to Vault to grab those secrets, there really isn't a workflow change there. So, developers as well as Octopus will be able to pick up those new secrets and automatically inject those into the applications without our operations team having to run around and change passwords everywhere, update Kubernetes secrets, et cetera, et cetera. Octopus will be able to grab those right from Vault and then put those right inside of our deployment. Scaling security, of course, when it comes to your very, very large organizations, we kind of glossed over compliance on the previous side, but of course, organizations are going to have a lot of compliance restrictions when it comes to some of the ways that we'll be able to deploy these applications. We want to make sure that we have a robust explanation of exactly what we're doing with these applications and scale that into a full enterprise deployment. We're not just, a small shop of 5 developers. We want to make sure that we have all of those compliance scenarios covered. Once again, Vault is going to have all that covered as far as FIPS and everything else. You'll be able to tell people exactly how all of that is encrypted.
On the point of compliance around Octopus, everything is logged and traced. So just to be aware, when going about a deployment, it will keep a running log of who did what and why. And so what changes went into effect for a deployment will be tracked there. That will be all part of the sort of auditing and traceability you have into those tools. It is also important to note that when you've done a deployment to a cluster, you want to make sure that you're observing any changes that are being tracked there. So you can use tools. There's a ton of tools that are available around observability to see what's happening and why. And that also comes in from the perspective of obviously managing costs. Costs are a big ticket item in the Kubernetes space, obviously. It's not necessarily a DevSecOps concept. It's more around, valuable resources, i.e. money. But you want to make sure that you're tracking those things very carefully. And there are tools around that as well.
Definitely. That's one of my favorite jokes that I've heard when it comes to, not only is the great joke of cloud just means you're using somebody else's computer, but there's also the joke that the cost of cloud isn't what you start up, but what you forgot to turn down.
That's right.
When it comes to looking at something like delivering applications, of course we can go ahead and see again exactly what happened, exactly what services we want to turn down, and where the developers have gone with some of the direction of the applications inside of a lot of these dynamic environments that we're keeping secure through monitoring. We're able to keep them secure through vulnerability scanning, and we're able to keep everybody aware of changes in the environment with tools like Octopus.
Awesome. So Elijah, we haven't had any questions come in, which is totally fine. Just to remind folks, we can totally take questions at this time. But did you want to go through a demo? We can talk to some of the parts and pieces that that maybe go into this.
Yeah. So I know that when I fired up Octopus, I was able to go ahead and add things like artifacts and be able to add things like new deployments. I noticed that Octopus also had, again, I'm a big fan of that artifact repository because we will be able to trust our supply chain when it comes to that. I know that, inside of GitHub, we've already got our security enabled. This, of course, is available when it comes to enterprise, but also is available when it comes to, GitHub enterprise. Oh, sorry, I already said that. Also, when it comes to public repositories.
Yeah, this part's really important, obviously, when managing. I know we're talking about GitHub here, but this can be definitely applicable to any Git-based repository, GitLab, etc. There are going to be aspects of role-based access control associated with this. You want to make sure you keep those tightly constrained. What's nice about GitHub in particular that I like is they've added new role types. So they have now a CI/CD role, so you don't have to tie up a custom role anymore in GitHub. They've just announced that, I think, last month. But these and other policies you can promote. Elijah, do you guys go about utilizing Terraform in context with security policy? That's something that we do here. We utilize Terraform for managing this stuff to make sure that it's always in sync.
Absolutely. So that's really being able to use Terraform for pretty much anything out there, whether that's configuring even your LDAP groups for something like Octopus, or
Yeah.
I'm sorry, for something like GitHub. That's where I was going with that.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
well as managing your infrastructure, and then of course a tool that we really like to show to people is how to use Sentinel for that policy enforcement.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
Not only is that going to help you out with, you mentioned cost earlier. So we could go into something like Sentinel, and then of course put that into GitHub Action, and we can make sure that Sentinel knows that somebody shouldn't be able to spawn up, let's say, 200 instances of, Kubernetes clusters with GPU enabled, and go on quite the crypto adventure or something along those lines. We can
Right.
go ahead and limit any of that exposure. Not that any of us would do that, of course, but just in the event. Sentinel would absolutely catch that.
Just to make sure that people know that this is live, we do have a question here. How do you secure secrets in the Kubernetes environment with Vault? There's a number of ways to do this, but Elijah, did you have any suggestions here?
Yeah, so I do enjoy the ability to actually use libraries for different languages. So that's Go, Python, etc. I think
Hmm.
that also makes it a little bit easier for developers to develop things on their desktop. As mentioned, there's of course the Vault CLI that will automatically populate the environment as well. So once we get those secrets into the developers' hands, of course, we want to find out what we're going to do with secrets when it comes to actually shipping the applications. As I think you've mentioned before, as well as earlier in the presentation, there was a mention of securing secrets and vaults with Octopus. Uh, you can go ahead and load those inside of Octopus and be able to populate those. When it comes to actually populating inside of Kubernetes, there are, several different ways to go about doing that. You can use
Yep.
traditional workflows. You can use Terraform, of course. Terraform can go inside a vault, pluck out that secret, and then of course add that into your secrets inside of Kubernetes. We were talking about some of the different ways that GitHub has pivoted as a really great tool now as well.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
GitHub secrets can also be populated when it
Yes.
comes to, using something like Terraform with GitHub. So that way you have, access to those secrets inside a vault, sort of end to end. Your developers can use those right on your workstations. The developers can use them inside of tools like Octopus to really get that golden path forward. They can use them in tools like Terraform, so that CI/CD, kind of jumps in there, where you've got infrastructure as code, where you've
Yes.
automatically got those environments populated. You can drop them into Kubernetes secrets. You can manage AWS secrets engine and other provider secrets engines to go ahead and create those secrets. So there's a lot of wonderful ways that you can pivot when it comes to something like Vault. And
Just
because
to, sorry to interrupt. I'm just going to quickly show what this looks like inside of Octopus. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. You've got some
Oh
great.
no.
Just wanted to show what this looks like. So we have this concept called variables in Octopus. This is how you expose these things. You can see we have secure or sensitive values, which are one way. You can only set them. You can't, and then they are basically set for that purpose. And then you can't read them out here, except in the context of obviously a deployment. So that's how those things are utilized on that. Anyways, jumping back to your screen. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Oh, so where were we? I mean, I guess that's another advantage to Vault. You've got companies like NextOrbit that are HashiCorp partners that will work with developers, that will work with your team to go ahead and figure out how to get Vault injected into your environment. But then you've also got really great providers like Octopus Deploy that can jump into Vault because it's such a popular tool that a lot of developers enjoy and use out there. So once again, we've got that really happy developer path. So it's not a trudge to go through and try to figure out if we've got, our environment files in here, make sure we've got like a golden git ignore that everybody's using. We want to make sure that, we've got our passwords rotated when it comes to some legacy systems where we might not be using certificates or anything like that. And so really Vault comes in really handy there. The where were we? I forget
We're in
exactly.
GitHub.
Yes,
Sorry,
we're
that
in
was like a
GitHub. We're
totally
in GitHub.
total tangent there. Sorry. So we're in GitHub. We're looking at RBAC. We talked a little bit about RBAC. But I guess the next step from here is we've got a CI process that will then kick off a build, possibly a compile, but do generally generating an image that we will then use for a container in the context of Kubernetes.
Right. And so we've got our GitHub Actions, which I've gone ahead and created a fairly naive GitHub action as part of the GitHub workflow here. But of course, Octopus also publishes their own GitHub Actions to be able to integrate things like monitoring these releases inside of the platform. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct. So just to kind of break this full circle, if I go ahead and switch over here to my screen here, if you go to github.com/marketplace, this is where you can go and see all kinds of things like the apps and the actions and all that sort of stuff. If you do a search here for Octopus Deploy, you'll see a bunch of things that look like this. These are some of the actions that we've built here. So what this means is in the context of a CI process like with GitHub Actions, if you're doing a build, you can then, once you've done all your steps as part of the CI process, you've done your tests, you've created your image, you're ready to formulate a container, etc., push it somewhere. Then you want to utilize one of these actions to integrate with Octopus Deploy. You can also use our app as well, but that's basically how you link those two systems together. And it doesn't have to be GitHub. It can be TeamCity, it can be GitLab, it can be Jenkins, it can be pretty much any CI process. We're using GitHub here because it's sort of the canonical example these days.
Right.
It's very widely used, but yeah, that's kind of the idea. So coming back here into GitHub, you can see we've got our GitHub action runs here that are based on YAML, and that YAML is just going to be a whole description of what we're doing for that CI process.
Yeah, and so just to give you a quick drill down, so when it comes to building this specific application, again, I made an extremely naive uh, GitHub action workflows, or sorry, GitHub workflow. So that way that we went ahead and created that artifact. In this instance, we're using the GitHub container registry, and Octopus will actually be able to go ahead and monitor that as we add those Octopus actions into our GitHub workflows. I wanted to just jump over and show, a very, again, this is extremely naive. If anybody's ever worked with any of the GitHub actions before, we've got, a quick, let's say that we've got any semantic tag. So we have that v1.0.2 or something along those lines. I'll go ahead and ship that. Of course, we just build a Docker container here and we send it off. These containers are scanned in things like GitHub. You can also
Mm-hmm.
use several different third parties to go ahead and make sure that you're scanning those containers before shipping them anywhere. Um, are there, what does it look like when it comes to Octopus and adding security scanners, John?
We don't typically run our scanning all the time in those places. There are steps that you can utilize for those processes, but typically I would say that that's best reserved for a CI process.
Right.
So when once we're mostly concerned about the deployment aspects of it, but we do have integration along the road for security best practices that you can certainly integrate as part of your deployment process if you wish.
Yeah, so that's again, looking at something like this, very naive. We can take that artifact, we can examine it with other tools, and then of course, Octopus Deploy will be able to follow this in a feed. And if I publish another version, that will go ahead and, we can notify everybody. We can have an approval process. We can have that shipped off from Octopus. To give you an idea of just, again, really naive example, I've gone ahead and done the classic os.environment.get inside of Python. So I've gone ahead and highlighted that here. This is really where, we would use something like Vault so that we would be able to go ahead and grab that connection string. This is not what we want to leave inside of, an
I was
environment
just gonna
file or
say,
anything
bad
like that.
developer, bad.
That
This is not.
exactly. These are the things that we kind of want to avoid. Of course, inside of something like this, we could use the library with Vault. We would be able to inject secrets rather than doing something like this inside of or using tools like Octopus.
Yeah,
There's
so here you would use a variable with Octopus. So you can
right.
inject those values as part of the environment. But yeah, typically you don't want to hard code this stuff.
Right. So we want to make sure that we've got things like that separated. Inside of this application too, I just wanted to call out that, we'd be able to use Vault inside of here. We can also use great tools like Prometheus. We want to make sure that we're actually able to monitor our applications as they go. This application, we've done a very simple hello world, and we've set up those Prometheus counters that we'll be able to ship off to something like Grafana. When it comes to Grafana, of course, you can make any sort of dashboards you like. As I go ahead and refresh this page, we'll
Oh,
see
it's a great
the
looking app.
yes. So I am a solutions architect. I am not a designer. I am definitely not a designer, right?
Sorry.
Absolutely not a designer. So really, this is showcasing the
I
tools.
had to say something. I'm sorry. All right.
Definitely. I mean, so this is also how I dress myself.
Oh, there you go.
So
Perfect.
yeah, I want to make sure that other people are in charge of things like, making sure I pick out the
Design.
correct colors
Yes.
for my clothes.
All right. Perfect. So
But
yeah,
yeah,
Grafana is a great tool. We actually have a data source integration with Grafana as well. So if you want to expose your deployments through Grafana, if you want to track them, that sort of thing, we have a custom data source you can use.
yeah, and Grafana plugs right into something like Kubernetes as well.
It
You can
does. Yeah.
also, use Loki, all of that other good stuff to be able to source those logs, be able to source those metrics. It doesn't necessarily have to be naive metrics like this, but a
hmm
developer would be able to jump in and see, okay, well, my app is actually serving records. Of course, this is again a naive page that is not the fanciest. But really having that visibility inside of things like GitHub will also push along your DevSecOps practice. The application here actually uses Mongo. So that way we'll be able to grab HTMX records, or I'm sorry, we'll be able to grab some of the records through our backend database. Our password and our connection string for this, of course, we would want to store inside of something like Vault. We would also be able to store it inside of, some of the Octopus variables. As far as the database and everything goes, really the sensitive information like passwords and things, I would definitely recommend that we're going to store that inside of Vault. But this is an example of something like a backend, a classic three-tier application. Maybe not classic because this is, a document store. We're not dealing with good old MySQL or anything like that. But yeah, a classic sort of three-tier application. We've got that data source, we've got the front ends. We're
Yep.
able to go ahead and build our build everything right up. If this was more of a robust example that we would see, inside of enterprise and things like that, we may have Mongo that is actually processed by something in the middle. We might use Mongo to store records. We might use Mongo to, source those records. We might, use any additional resources that we would have out there. And all of those secrets around those resources, as well as variables like connection strings, of course, we would have to track inside of something like for secret material, we would use Vault. For any of our variables, we could put that right inside of Octopus. So if we change MongoDB collections, if we go ahead and want to change something where we've got to update a password, all of that would be something that we would have right inside of our application. Speaking of that application, of course, as well as Vault, then this is the dashboard that you get when you jump over to HashiCorp. This features things like Terraform Enterprise, everything else as part of the HashiCorp cloud offerings. It does include, our secrets for our application. Inside of this, I've added our Octopus demo with some basic strings that we have here, usernames, passwords, endpoints, connection strings, pretty much the de facto kind of variables that we would have in
hmm
there. Uh,
hmm
do you happen to have an example of where you might fetch something outside of the HashiCorp Vault that you've made in Octopus?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, let me switch over to my environment here. So this is our samples directory here. So this is our samples app up here at the top. There's a feature called Spaces. Spaces allow you to separate basically projects from each other. I'm trying to remember if we have one that is recent that utilizes Vault. I don't know if we have one out of the box, but we can just take a look at I'm going to go back to the car rental again. So go
Right.
back to the car rental, take a look at the process. I'll show you what this looks like when you go ahead and add the step. So here, this is where we're going to retrieve a secret. So in that previous screen, you saw Elijah show what it looks like when you're persisting secrets inside there. So here on my, if you haven't seen this before, don't worry. This is our deployment process here. So step 1 to step 9. This is like do this, do this, do this, do this. This is how I do a deployment. And in here, as Elijah mentioned, we're notifying folks on Slack. We're doing a manual intervention here, things like that. So let's say, I don't know, for whatever reason, I want to come in here and I want to do, okay, I want to retrieve a secret. So I can type in vault. And you can see here we can do a variety of operations here. So I can retrieve a key value here if I wanted to. I can also retrieve other values as well. I can do if I'm using JSON web tokens, I can utilize these in the context of a conversation with Vault. Sometimes this is necessary when performing those operations, but this is essentially how I would go about adding this step. And then once you've done that that process of installing and adding the step itself, we give you all these knobs and buttons for controlling how that step operates. So I know this looks really daunting, but don't worry. The most important stuff that you want to pay attention to is in this section here that is particular to Vault. So it's going to ask you things like, okay, where is your Vault server located? What API version are you using? What is the namespace that you want to use? What is the token you're going to use for authentication, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whether or not I want to print out the variable name itself as part of my deployment process, et cetera. There are other things as well that I can control. So again, these are things that are outside the context of Vault, but this is how you would go about integrating as part of that deployment process.
Right. And so that's where you would be able to use different strategies inside of Vault. For this one, we've used just basic KVV2 strategies. This is again where you'd be able to add dynamic engines if you had your own backends that you wanted to use, such as any of the SQL engines. You can also add a variety of different information to KVV2. So if you want to version secrets, things like that, you can put that in there as well. This does allow us to add things like app roles, and you can see like right on the dashboard here, we can add different role assignments to see who has access to these keys. I thought it was pretty interesting when I first look at some of the ways that you would be able to use Vault with Octopus Deploy, especially the idea of don't print my secrets to the screen. That was
Yeah.
that's a great step. So if you've used GitHub and GitLab for quite a long time, then you know that at one point in time you would pretty much see everything. If you were able to get
Sure.
access to that CI, you could see everything. Sometimes your developers can do really tricky stuff too. So they might, base 64 encode a secret and then cut and paste it somewhere else. Don't do that. That's not great.
Mm.
That's not great. Being able to just hide that secret inside of something like Octopus Deploy is really nice. You can have a separation of duties there as well. So you've
Mhm.
got your developers working on that CI/CD, and then you may have your operations team that's working on creating those workflows inside of Octopus Deploy. And then, of course, you've got your product owners that are able to see all that through notifications and Slack. It's a really nice, kind of end to end from everybody working to get a product into production.
Awesome.
Um,
All right. Don't see any other questions listed here. But what I might do is I will switch over to my slides and talk a little bit about kind of some of the things that are worth mentioning here in the context of this conversation. So if you haven't seen this report, this is a state of Kubernetes security in 2024 report. It's from Red Hat. They've done a lot of work asking folks questions around things like, what are some of the top concerns you have around Kubernetes security, et cetera. Definitely something worth taking a look at. These are some of the key findings that they found. Obviously, the top one being of organizations are delayed or slowed down their deployments due to Kubernetes security concerns around Kubernetes. So the whole reason why you want to take these practices into account, continuous delivery deployment, best practices around security, utilizing concepts like RBAC, making sure you're monitoring things, utilizing tools like Prometheus, Grafana, getting really slick at CLIs like kubectl, etc., monitoring the life of your pods, etc. These are really important things for you to keep track of going forward as part of your process, your DevSecOps process around Kubernetes. And so these are obviously exemplified by the security port that's listed here. So that's important. So just to highlight some of the best practices, just to wrap things up. So make sure that you're utilizing RBAC role-based access control as part of this. Make sure that you also be careful about your network policies, specifically around your clusters. So, defining your ingress and egress policies around Kubernetes clusters is really, really important. Also, make sure that you maintain a regular audit of your configuration. So we highlighted or talked to it a little bit around environment variables. You saw examples of this with variables in Octopus Deploy. We talked a lot about this in terms of Vault for credential or secrets management. These things are really, really important, and tracking who has access to what is going to be a top priority, because it's going to give you more confidence going into your deployments if you know that these things are locked down. Also, make sure that you do regular audits. This is something that is important. You want to make sure you're constantly checking to see whether or not people have access to certain things that they shouldn't. I know that things in a development environment, things can get a little bit loose. Sometimes you tend to open up a little bit more as your development teams get a little bit more, let's say, a little bit more mature in their use of Kubernetes. They tend to open things up a little bit. I want to use kubectl. I want to manage this. I have to maintain this this system as part of the process that I'm building out. You want to make sure that you keep those things under wraps, and you're constantly auditing those things for both security access and compliance. And then finally, you can utilize Kubernetes security posture management. There are a variety of tools around KSPM. This is something that is heavily utilized in this space, and it's important to keep those things in check. So with that, make sure that when utilizing security in the context of your development workflows, make sure that you're utilizing security along the entire length of your pipeline. You want to shift left your tools more towards the developer side. Utilize, there's a variety of ways in which you can do this. This is independent of Kubernetes itself. Static code analysis, for example, credential management, making sure that variables aren't leaking, etc. You're utilizing tools like GitHub, GitLab, etc. Those are tools. I mean, they give a variety of capabilities around them. Utilize what's available in each marketplace for those solutions. There's a variety of checks and compliance checks. You can use those. There's a ton of stuff that you can do around security scanning, usage reports around Kubernetes itself. There's a huge ecosystem around Kubernetes. It's amazing just how many tools there are around Kubernetes itself. And then finally, because we're talking about DevSecOps, which is about process and involving people, make sure that there's a good collaboration between yourself, your development team, and those who are tasked with monitoring and maintaining your clusters. So that's going to require a lot of communication, a lot of Slack conversations. And there's processes along the way that you can do. You can triage issues through Slack channels. We have incident reports, etc., that come in. For example, we'll fire up a Slack channel just for the incident. We'll prefix it with the word incident, and then we'll triage our problems there. These and other sorts of practices around DevSecOps are really important, especially around Kubernetes. And that's why we want to highlight those things here. So with that, I don't see any other questions. Elijah, did you want to wrap up with any final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, Kubernetes is a really great platform that's been, of course, around for a while now. But really being able to kind of shift some of the thinking from traditional applications. I've created this, and just to age myself, I've created this in PHP, and
Okay.
it connects to my MySQL database, right? Instead, you can work with things like Kubernetes and be able to monitor and check for Helm charts updates, kind of throw things together with something like Bitnami. But of course, that ease of use also comes where people might get a little loose when it comes
Yep.
to variables, etc. Having that single pane of glass inside of something like Octopus is valuable. Having that
Mm-hmm.
single pane of glass inside of something like GitHub, so you can see all of your CI steps, and then of course being able to use additional tools to make sure that your supply chain is intact. You're not using containers with built-in vulnerabilities, and you're not accidentally pulling the wrong libraries and containers and running them on your cluster.
Awesome. So just to remind folks, Elijah is from Next Orbit, which is obviously, if you're looking to get some information around these and other types of topics, you can check them out at nextorbit.co. You'll see a site that looks like this. You guys are doing stuff with AI. That's cool. Lots of stuff to worth checking out. Give them a shout out, that sort of thing. Anything you want to tell us about Next Orbit? Where are you guys based?
Yeah, so Next Orbit, we take business throughout North America right now. So
Okay.
some of our leadership is up in Canada, I'm
Very
down
nice.
here in Chicago, so
Okay.
we have the same weather, unfortunately. That's part of the disappointment there is nobody's out having mai tais or anything like that, while the rest of us
All
are
right.
freezing. We're all stuck in that same pattern. You
Awesome.
did mention AI there, and I know Octopus has a couple of things with GitHub Copilot.
Yes, that's right. Yep. So, what are you guys doing around AI?
So we've used some AI. We've evaluated some of the ways to use AI to generate things like configuration. Since we're a HashiCorp partner, and we're all very familiar with those tools, we when we review things that have been generated by AI right now, we have run into a couple questionable things. So having that knowledge inside your organization is really great, because AI, I would say, is not quite perfect. A lot of those examples out there might, not write a Sentinel policy correctly, or may omit a few things, or, in the case of poor Pulumi not too long ago, they had AI hallucinate, you know, uh,
Hmm.
resources inside of Amazon that didn't actually exist. So really being able to have somebody review a lot of that information is critical still.
Yep. If you're using a tool like Copilot, we have an extension for this you can use. This is our Octopus for GitHub Copilot extension. Basically, allows you to communicate with your Octopus deploy instances via Copilot, so you can ask it questions, things like that. We were part of the initial launch around GitHub Copilot itself, the extension announcement. So you can check that out there. Lots of docs around this. Lots of fun stuff to integrate with Octopus Deploy. Anyways, Elijah, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your time and attention joining us here on today's webinar. Don't forget, we have some other webinars coming up. I mentioned them earlier in the resource there, which is at /webinars. Feel free to sign up for some exciting webinars that are coming up. But until next time, Elijah, thanks. And to all of you, happy deployments. Take care, everyone.
Good deployments.